Formula One's sellout British Grand Prix was a hit with the fans. A Max Verstappen win for Red Bull, unsurprisingly, but a Lando Norris second on the podium and Lewis Hamilton, home favourite, third. Two Brits for the home crowd on the podium. That's a pretty good day to go watch Formula One for so many of those fans that came to watch. Oscar Piastri in the second McLaren. Best result in Formula One for him in a fourth place. I'm Martyn Lee here in the Autosport podcast studio, and joining me for our Silverstone review straight from the track is Matt Q. He's found himself a quiet corner of Silverstone. So let's kick things off. Matt, last time out in Austria, we saw Lando Norris and the McLaren get the upgrades. This time, both cars had the upgrade. We saw that front row start, and he seemed to jump Max Verstappen, or maybe Max had a problem, if you got some insight on how he did that, but he got into the lead. McLaren led the British Grand Prix, not just for one or two corners, like that battle with his teammate Perez at last time out, but Max Verstappen really had to work for that win today. Well, at least for a few laps before he pulled out and broke the DRS. What do you think today of McLaren's performance? Is that genuine? And have we seen a bit of a shake-up in the order today?
Yeah, it's the main talking point after this weekend, isn't it? Or ever since sort of qualifying and the 2-3 result, as everyone's been going on about it, and it's sort of the ground effect era's greatest hits, isn't it? Everyone's going, well, now they're doing well. Suddenly, doesn't it half look like a Red Bull? But it was a brilliant performance from them. I think equal parts. Norris got a good start, Piastri got a mega start, and Verstappen fluffed his launch. You know, they've said. Red Bull have said they'll go into the data and check with the engineers, but I suspect that the real reason is just a rare sort of slight error from Verstappen as opposed to a problem, and he came back strongly. But yeah, what a fantastic performance. As you say, McLaren are in the middle of a 3-stage update where they've said that the key line is they're going to change virtually every single aerodynamic part in their car. So they're about 75% of the way through that now. So Austria was a big one. Then they've had a new front wing for Silverstone, but only Norris has got that. So Piastri in an ever so slightly slower car than Norris, and they've, potentially exciting for this race to be second. They're not going to catch Red Bull, but they've got even more parts to come next time out in Hungary. But they were so strong, but where they were strongest relative to rivals is in a straight line. And that's where Red Bull is stronger still, as you saw with the way Verstappen could come back, is that DRS efficiency of the Red Bull. But, where the media centre is like a couple of walls away from the pit straight, but still through that you could hear the grandstand cheers as Norris dived up the inside into one, and Piastri gave it a really good go as well. So that's a mega story. We'll go on to the other teams a bit. I think they've been ever so slightly flattered by this, and so Red Bull now, that's becoming apparent that as brilliant as Red Bull are, their job is made significantly easier by the fact that they don't know who their next best is. It changes so much. But as a storyline, not a spectacular Grand Prix any means, but the first 7 laps were good.
Yeah, absolutely. But obviously there was that virtual safety car, then a full safety car, which worked for some and not for others. We'll get on in a minute to how that benefited Lewis Hamilton and maybe lost Oscar Piastri a podium. But it was a choice for McLaren to put on the hard tyres, and with, 15, 17 laps to go by the time that Haas was lifted away, it was a case of Lando and Oscar being out on a different tyre strategy to all the others. Now, I was lucky enough to be at Silverstone yesterday for the live podcast, and Zach Brown was talking about how, we've got some, slightly different tyres this weekend in Silverstone. It's great because there's actually a nice real gap between them. Well, we saw soft tyres being used on the restart, and the McLarens on the hard tyres. And I must admit, watching it in real time, it was a moment of, oh no, what have they done? But actually, Lando did some stellar defensive driving on Lewis Hamilton, and he kept that second place. Were you thinking the same as me when McLaren bolted on those hard tyres and they're just in a sea of soft tyre runners? Like, have they thrown this away? What have they gone and done? Lando even joked about it afterwards. Was it just me, or did you think the same?
No, I thought the same for sort of two reasons. One, if you remember back to last year, sort of the way or how badly people started on that hard tyre. If anything, that's what triggered the massive Shogun U-shunt, is because that C1 was so rubbish. And the compound's a bit different for this year, but effectively it's still a weak tyre. And then you had a proper real world example when Russell bolted on and just did nothing. It was really suboptimal. But when your safety car came out, it reminded me sort of like of a round of Countdown where you can either play a safe 5-letter word or a risky 7. And that's what it was with the strategy today, where it was like you could have gone for come out of the pits on a set of softs in P10 and then try to work your way forward, or come out in P6 on a set of hards, but then sort of have to defend against the faster cars behind. So I don't think it's not like when there have been other strategy mess ups and you go, well, in that moment you could tell which way it was going. I think this was much more 50-50, and few drivers are coming away absolutely blasting their pit wall on this occasion. But yeah, like you say, the hard tyre, when Piastri came out on that, that's where Mercedes worked really well to jump Hamilton with the better strategy. And then more kudos for Norris, because those 2 laps at the restart when the harder tyres are A, that much less fast, but B, that much harder to warm up, and then you had that pronounced threat from Hamilton, and it was vital for P2 to keep the Mercedes behind. So to do that on by far the inferior tyre in terms of sort of getting it where it needs to be and its peak performance was incredibly impressive.
Yeah, and because McLaren have been through tough times, they're not in the title battle. People gave them plenty of praise. Max Verstappen was saying, oh, well done, McLaren, how wonderful for Lando Norris. I know they're good mates and stuff, but these are ultimately very competitive sports people, and if McLaren were snapping at their heels, he wouldn't be saying that. Lewis Hamilton did the same thing, and that's because McLaren went up to 5th in the Constructors Championship today, but they're a fair way behind Ferrari, and Mercedes won't be too worried about them yet. They still had some time to say some nice words about Lando Norris and McLaren, but I thought I'd pick your brains on something Lewis Hamilton said, which was really praising the straight line speed of the McLaren. Lewis Hamilton said that he's not surprised that McLaren did well. He said because, well, look at the Red Bull and look at the McLaren. And I think, you don't need to read between the lines. It's pretty obvious. He's laid it all out there, really, what he's saying. And then he followed it up with, and we have a lot of work to do. Is that a coded message? Or even actually, to be honest, not that coded message back to the team bosses and everyone working back at the factory, which is, hey, look, if we need to copy Red Bull here, there is nothing wrong. Let's just make a quicker Mercedes. A little bit of pressure I felt a bit of pressure being turned, especially yesterday as well, and today, with Lewis praising the McLaren for looking like the Red Bull, and then immediately following up with saying, but we need to do some more work. What do you think?
Yeah, obviously there's Hamilton called it a wake-up call, and there's been several points over the past sort of 18 months now where you could say Mercedes are in a rough patch or worse. But I actually think it's genuinely, and I know this is going to sound like a cheap headline, but it's looking a bit like a full-blown crisis and something Wolff really needs to manage, because, okay, you got it wrong with your first attempt at a ground effect car. Then they haven't made a step forward over the winter. But I think now there is enough of a sample size, and although a direct comparison is hard, I think there's enough of a sample to say they are no better off from this major Monaco upgrade, which was meant to revive everything. I don't think it's materially noticeable in terms of lap time, in terms of finishing order. I think they've gone down this Red Bull side pod route, and then sort of that is at odds. They've said all the way through, it's not just about the side pods, it's about all the floor underneath, but you design a car in sort of harmony, all the bits work together. So they've compromised it by copying a bit from another car that is against their design philosophy, and they're no better off, are they, than where they have been by sort of abandoning what they knew before. And so, yeah, it's what they're doing isn't fixing it. So I think this is pretty major, and that Toto Wolff has really got sort of something. It's ironic that he had Pep, or maybe not ironic, maybe absolutely intentional that he had Pep Guardiola in his garage this weekend, sort of manage a team through various rough patches and against the opposition. But Mercedes are really dropping the ball here, and everything they pin their hopes on is that the technical reshuffle and that Monaco packages. They're no better off with it.
Yeah, and after the Saturday live podcast that we did on the stage for the Fan Village, the GP Racing Fan Village, I was saying that one of the things about sport generally is that I find really interesting the psychology of sport. And one of those things about the psychology of sport is when dynasties fail, and whether that is in football or rugby or motorsport, how teams have it all their own way. They've got all the right people, all the right smarts, all the right knowledge. but for whatever reason, they can't get it together. And it's, well, for multiple reasons. And I thought, I know a lot of people, you know, in the teams listen to the podcast and watch the videos as well. I thought, that would, you know, that's actually almost borderline rude to anyone working at Brackley that heard me say that, because in no way is Mercedes, you know, a fallen dynasty. They're on the podium again today. Yeah, they're not fighting for a championship, but they're still a very good Formula One team. But I think you're right, actually, in terms of, it's not a cheap headline. It is a full-blown crisis, because anything but winning Formula One races and ultimately winning championships is not good enough for a team that have the expectations they have. So hopefully sort of that tempers what I said yesterday a little bit. Like, it is still a huge problem, but it's not, I don't think it's a cheap headline at all. Finishing off the McLaren chat, Oscar Piastri would have been nailed on for a third place today. He had the pace to finish third. Just the timing of the safety car that came out to rescue Magnussen's car meant that he was in the wrong part of the track, and Hamilton was able to get in, jump him in the pit stops, and Piastri couldn't get past the Mercedes of Lewis Hamilton. So to give Lewis Hamilton yet another Silverstone podium, look, it was fantastically popular with the crowd, the home crowd, and an Oscar Piastri best result in Formula One so far. So I think he'll be happy, but that was definitely a double podium missed today. Let's talk a little bit about another team that earlier on in the season we were talking about podiums, and that is Aston Martin. Now, okay, so Alonso started from 9th and worked his way up, but I want to pick your brains, Matt, on Aston Martin. Have the others outdeveloped them? Have they just been in a bit of a rough spot and you think they've got all the right bits on the car? Have they gone in the wrong direction? Because it's been a couple of races now, and the Astons have had a little bit of slow pace. What do you think?
I wouldn't say it's going in the right direction, but I think everything else you said is pretty much on the money, Martin, that, you know, there is this development cycle, and it's staggered, right? So, you know, you take an incremental step forward, then your rivals come back, and blah, blah, blah. And if you're just ever so slightly out of sequence, you can enter a rut. But also the weakness of that AMR 23 throughout the season has been drag, or a straight line performance. And then basically Austria, where it's 1, 2, 3 straights and only 7 corners, or you come to Silverstone and what is it, 1.5 miles where it's flat out, isn't it? You come out of Luffield and then you're keep it pinned, committed, keep it flat through Copse, and then through Maggots Beckett's, then on the hanger straight down to Stowe. That's your next major braking zone. And so although, you know, Silverstone has lots of high speed corners and that fiddly new section, it's a straight line sort of efficiency track. So I think that exposes an Aston weakness. So when they are out of sequence in terms of upgrades, and McLaren, you know, almost like a step change, it's been that convincing this weekend, and I think that explains it. Although, you know, Alonso drove well enough. I don't think anyone's too alarmed. I think you've still got they're way ahead of where they're expected to be, so perhaps there's an element of, well, we always thought our rivals would catch up. But B, I think, yeah, it's not crisis management. I think it's a couple of tracks that don't really suit them. They're allowed an off-colour weekend, and if they once their upgrade cycle comes back, they'll be fine. What I would say towards the end of the season is that obviously the upgrades coming for the next few races have been in the pipeline for a little while, but 1st of July, so a week, or just over a week ago as we record this, don't forget that's when the aerodynamic testing restrictions reset. So Aston Martin, up until this point, have had their wind tunnel and CFD allowance based on finishing 7th in last year's Constructors Championship. Now they're 3rd behind Mercedes, so that's what they'll be set on now. So their percentage will drop. So I think we can revisit this topic maybe later in the season if they are starting to fall back ever so slightly.
Yeah, we'll finish off by talking about the Williams in just a second. We'll take a look at the Drivers' World Championship after Silverstone today. Max Verstappen, of course, leading the way, but with such an impressive lead on 255 points. And then his teammate Sergio Perez, who I saw today, headlines like he battled back and he scythed through the pack. And I thought, well, no, that is Sergio finishing second if he'd done that, and he didn't do that today. Decent drive, but no, he didn't completely exonerate himself from not putting in that time in qualifying, a sort of bank a lap or whatever, just underperforming as Verstappen's teammate, and once again missing out on Q3, not getting out of Q1 this weekend. So I think he'll want to get to the summer break as quick as possible and move on. Fernando Alonso on 137 points, and then Lewis Hamilton in 4th in the Drivers' Championship, 121. Carlos Sainz, a fair way back, and then George Russell, Charles Leclerc, Lance Stroll, Lando Norris with his big haul of points today, 18 points, and Esteban Ocon in 10th. I want to finish off by talking a little bit about the Williams. Made headlines all weekend. After Friday, Dave Robson said, no, we weren't light fueling it and going for glory runs. That pace was decent, and we need to A, understand it, and B, not muck it up. That was the phrase he used. And they didn't muck it up today, actually. They had a really decent Sunday afternoon. Alex Albon started in 8th, finished 7th. Ahead of the Ferraris, overtook the Ferraris on track, and Williams should be utterly delighted with their haul, not finishing as high up as they did in the practice sessions, but I still think that is a brilliant result. Is that one of the last chances in 2023 that we'll see Williams doing so well? Is it ultimately track specific, or will there be chances later in the year for us to celebrate a nice little story there where tracks suit them? What do you think?
I think you can look at two pretty immediate opportunities. I think Spa, again, similar to what I was saying about that Silverstone stretch, get out of La Source and you can keep it pinned up through Eau Rouge, Radion into the Kemmel Straight. That should prove pretty handsome. And then after that, you've got Monza as well. So that should suit the straight line efficiency of the Williams. The thing that risks that is that I think Williams are in this situation where they don't quite understand the performance. But basically, the line from the team, which has been a bit amusing, is we're happier to be quick and not really know why than to get to Sunday night and properly understand why we were rubbish, which is an amusing way of looking at it. But I think it goes back to one, again, like I said, that stretch where the Williams is quick in a straight line. I think Albon did a mega job. It's the most convincing performance from Logan Sargent, and the team is better off than it was last season. And you have Alpha having a shocker, Haas being unreliable, the AlphaTauri upgrade just not working in the slightest to elevate Williams ever so slightly. And also, you speak to drivers and you get the impression that the car is relatively benign. It's not vicious. So, when you come to Silverstone, which is an airfield, and was it turns 1, 9 and 15, I particularly, so what's that? We'll give it proper corner name. So Abbey, Copse and Stowe for all you purists. The car was really unsettled, or many cars, Ferrari in particular, massively unsettled by the wind and the tailwind, just pushing it wide. And so if you've got a skittish car, that really comes to the fore. Williams not having that, I think, has helped them again. But I think there's still a big question mark. It's quite how much Williams want to worry about that question mark, or just sort of enjoy the celebration and a couple of points while they can.
Absolutely. Well, having a look at how the teams shake out, Red Bull, of course, leading the way, but the battle behind is interesting. Mercedes with a big haul of points today in second on 203, and then Aston Martin in third. A little bit of air between those two teams now in the Constructors Championship, with just Alonso 6 points today. Then Ferrari and McLaren are now on 59 points, but scoring 30 today, so more than half of McLaren's points this season coming in just one event. We've not had time to talk about Team Enston. It's been a stinker today. 1-2 forgets for Alpine, and the local engineers and teams working on that will want to strike this one off and move on to the next one, which is what we will do. We'll end that video there because you have to get back into, well, all the reporting that you are doing, Matt, for the website autosport.com and everything we want to read in the magazine when it's out on Thursday in Autosport Mag. I'm off to go and get ready for the Autosport podcast. That'll be in your feeds a little bit later, and we want to hear from you in the comments below what you thought of today's British Grand Prix. Did you enjoy the battle at the beginning with Max under a bit of pressure? Was he really under pressure though? Maybe he was. And we had a little bit of Max tyre chat today. Oh, I don't like these soft tyres. Oh, I'm not sure. A bit of bluffing there, I think. But what do you think? Let us know in the comments below. We love to see your comments. Love to know what's on your mind. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.